Hi, everyone. This is Rico Figliolini, host of Peachtree Corners Live here in the city of Peachtree Corners in Gwinnett County. And lately, we've had election candidates on the show. And today we have a special candidate who's running for Gwinnett County Sheriff. His name is Baron Reinhold. Hey, Baron. Thanks for joining
Hey,
us.
thanks. It's great to be on your show.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you being here with us. Baron has a long resume of participation in all sorts of things, certainly in the military, right? And different posts, different positions that you've been in, from everything from a professor of naval science to director of military community management. You've been part of Nuclear Command and Control Operations Team 3. I was
Right.
looking at that. I was like, wow. Squadron commanding officer, United States Air Force. You were on the admiral staff in Bahrain, I guess, during deployment in 2003 to 2004. Is that correct?
Well, there's about three different things in there. I was at U.S.
Yeah.
Strategic Command, and I was also on. That was a combatant command in Omaha, Nebraska. But I was also on an admiral staff out in Bahrain for 2 years, and another admiral staff in Norfolk for 2 years.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and the list goes on. It's an expansive list of accomplishments. Um, and you've been involved in a lot of volunteer work in organizations. Uh, quite involved. And your some of the past groups included Boy Scouts, Kiwanis Club, right? But what I'd like you to do is tell us a little bit about yourself beyond the resume, if you will, and what you're currently doing, and give us a brief a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, thanks again, Rico. Yeah, my background, I joined the Navy right out of high school. I enlisted for a year, and then I went to the Naval Academy Prep School that year, and then on to the Naval Academy. When I graduated from there, I ended up going to flight school, finishing up flight school, and spent 30 years as an officer all over the world. Just kind of look at the last half of my career, which is most of my senior leadership positions. Right after 9/11, I was the officer in charge of a number of combat detachments. Our squadron got surged for the next 20 years, doing the most important missions in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Somalia. And after that, I was on that admiral staff. Brought the family out to Bahrain, right there in the Gulf region. I was a couple of years there, then was in charge of global strike planning at U.S. Strategic Command for 2 years. Then the third year there, I was the deputy commander's executive assistant. Went on to command one of the nation's two highest reconnaissance squadrons, and again spent most of that time in Afghanistan and a little bit in Iraq and Somalia. And then was the officer in charge, or the senior officer on the Nuclear Command and Control 747. So literally, if we had nuclear war, we would be at a different base every night. We're constantly on the move, and if nuclear war happened, our ground nodes would be gone, and I would personally be briefing the president on his nuclear options and executing his war orders from the 747. So that was totally different than my reconnaissance days overland and in the combat zones. And so anyway, then from there I went on to command a unit that was in charge of the entire Navy's 388,000 community management. So we made sure that the entire Navy over a moving 30-year period was properly manned in every subspecialty, which was a pretty wild job. And then I finished up, like you said, I was the commanding officer of NROTC Atlanta region. So I had a battalion at Morehouse that had Spelman and Clark Atlanta attached to that, and then a battalion at Georgia Tech that had Georgia State and Kennesaw State attached. And we trained all the naval officers and future Marine Corps officers at those 6 schools. So that's kind of a quick 35-year around the horn.
Yeah. So that's where did you originally come from, Baron? Where'd you?
I was born in Rochester, New York, but we moved around a lot when I was a kid, and we settled in Miami when I was in first grade. So I considered Miami home until Hurricane Andrew wiped out the house, and my family moved up to Melbourne, Florida. By then though, I was out of the house and in the Navy, blasting around the world. So Miami was the home that I grew up in.
Gotcha. And when did you move back actually to Well, when did you move to Atlanta? Let's put it
Well, we
to
did 16
continue.
moves since I've been married, which is, that's kind of wild to think about. My oldest daughter did 15 of those. So we moved here in 2015, built a house
Okay.
here in Gwinnett in Swanee, and made the commute down 95 or 85 rather
Hmm.
every day.
Yeah.
So got up really really early, got down there before the traffic got insane, and would usually either try to beat the traffic home or stay until the traffic had dissipated.
Wow. Yeah. God knows the traffic has continued to build. It doesn't disappear. Um,
Yep.
but
And when I
you're
hired January 1st of 2020, and then since then I started a consulting business. So I still do a lot of work down in Pensacola, which is the cradle of naval aviation, which has been a lot of fun
okay.
because all the senior officers down there at the command are, um, buddies of mine, the admirals and whatnot. And then the students, a lot of them were my former students at my Georgia Tech and Morehouse Battalion. So I always get together with them when I'm down there. So it's I've got both ends of the spectrum, the senior most and the junior most people every time I go down
Right.
there.
That must be fascinating. The
Yep.
my youngest wants to go into military history.
Uh-huh.
He's actually attending Kennesaw. Not quite the place for that, but
Uh-huh.
that's where he's starting at.
Great.
Yeah, he's all into, especially prior to World War II and prior, actually,
Yeah.
that part. So it's fascinating to be able to see and talk to people that are involved. So your consulting work is still with the military, I'm assuming.
Correct.
Okay. And so I guess the biggest question, the first question would be why? Why run for Gwinnett County Sheriff then? Why run for that post? Why do you see that you need to do that?
Well, really, there are a lot of reasons. First, we did exhaustive study. We could have lived anywhere we wanted to when we moved here.
Mhm.
And we did a lot of study, a lot of research, and Gwinnett County was the place to move to, in 2015.
Mhm.
And, it's been great. And,
Right.
we've seen a lot of changes, and almost all of those have been in the wrong direction in the last 3 to 4 years. Whether it's
Mhm.
school board problems or taxation, rates. We have
Right.
the highest. I think well, I don't think I know we have the highest number of people, you know, having a problem with their property taxes and appealing those. So those are going the wrong direction, and then certainly crime and yeah, and just everything that the sheriff's office is supposed to be doing, they're failing in a major way. And so, seeing what Butch Conway did for a quarter century, and then seeing what's happened since Sheriff Taylor took over, it's night and day. And
Mhm.
any county can only really be as good as the sheriff and the law enforcement. And since the sheriff is the senior law enforcement officer in the county, that's a direct reflection on who's doing that job. And so, bottom line is, I think
Okay.
Sheriff Taylor's doing a horrible job, and I think I can do. I think I could turn the county around completely.
Now the sheriff, so then people understand the difference, right? Gwinnett County Police and the Sheriff Department, two separate entities, right? Gwinnett
Correct.
County Police has the police officers that arrive on the scene of a crime, that patrol the streets and stuff, right? Gwinnett County Sheriff has other responsibilities, including the jail system, serving um,
Warrant.
subpoenas and such, right?
Yep.
Um,
Corporate.
so two different. Just want people to know that two different areas. One of the things that and quite frankly, to my audience, we're not fact checking any of this. Um, But Barron is one of two candidates running, right? So we have the incumbent Kibo, Sheriff Kibo, and we have Barron running. And one of the things you want to do, based on what you're saying, is that you want to be able to do a full audit. So how will you ensure that the audit's done correctly and that it's open, impartial, transparent? How would you plan to do that?
Well, just one thing before we go on. There's actually
Mhm.
5 people running against the incumbent right now.
Five
I'm
people.
I'm
I'm sorry. You're right. You're
Yeah.
right.
So
I
there's three.
apologize.
Yeah. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
it's a partisan race, which I don't think it should be. But guess people aren't interested in what I think on that. So there's two Republicans and three other Democrats that are running against the incumbent,
Okay.
who's on the Democrat side. But so obviously nobody is happy with how he's doing. Otherwise, we wouldn't have so many people running for that position.
Right.
But yeah, so the issue is, when Butch Conway, who was the sheriff for 24 years here in Gwinnett County, who incidentally endorsed me over all the other candidates, even though a couple of them have worked for him or with him. One of them worked directly for him for about 12 years. Butch, when he left, he had a budget of $105 million. Right now, Sheriff Taylor has a budget of about $170 million, and he's got almost about half of the deputies and jailers have left. So he's got a force that's half the size, and he's got a budget that's $65 million ish, more. And so there's money being spent in crazy places, obviously. We know that from day one when he repainted all the sheriff's cars with his name on the back of them. Again, a waste of taxpayers' money. But there's a lot. There's where is the money? That's the whole issue. You can't trust government. You can't trust law enforcement when money's being squandered on frivolous things, and you can't. I mean, I've put in all kinds of requests for Freedom of Information Act stuff, but I didn't know that you have to pay for all that. So I figured, okay, I'm a taxpayer. I want to know where this money's being spent, or I want to know how many deputies we've lost every year for the last 4 years. And if you want to know that, which is right on a spreadsheet, you got to pay $150, or you got to pay this, or they slow roll you the information, even if you do pay. So those kinds of things are frustrating. You talked about transparency. I mean, I want to do an audit, and you'd have a professional, reputable, agency come in and do that, or organization, and find out where all this money's been spent. I mean, if ground zero of building trust with the citizens of the county, it's based on knowing facts. And I can't find facts, and I'm in this race without paying a lot of money. So I think we need to do this audit. We need to flip the table, make it public facing, even if it's pretty damning. Whatever the results are of that, the public needs to know. And you need to snap a chalk line and say, okay, this is what happened before. This is when I took over, and this is what happens from here on out. So, and it's not just a budgetary chalk line I'm talking about. In the Navy, every time a commanding officer takes over, they do something called a command climate survey. And again, that's snapping another chalk line, but that's more typically with personnel and programs. So what that does is the entire unit gets to give takes an anonymous survey that's very in depth, and then they get a free flow. They can type whatever they want at the end of that. And so as a new CO coming in, new commanding officer coming in, you get the results of all that, and you get to see, okay, if it's just one or two things, maybe it's not all that important, but it's good to know. But if there's huge blocks of, ink on, okay, this is a major problem, then it gives you, the new person, the information you need to know that there's a problem, B, address that, bring all your people in and say, hey, this is obviously a huge issue here in this command. Here is my plan. You bring in people so you can all talk about what that issue is, what the background, why there's that problem, and then come up with a solution. And then you brief, personally as the CO, you brief all your different levels of rank, and then you give them an opportunity to give you feedback, face to face. And so, those kinds of things are critically important for a new boss coming in, and we will do something like that, not only with the people who are currently at the sheriff's office, the deputies and jailers, but I'll have surveys sent out to those that left, because obviously they left for a reason, and I know why a lot of them left, because I've talked to scores of them. So that's important information.
Sure. I would imagine also that a place like the county jail system, the sheriff system department. I mean, if they're expending money, there's probably usually bids for certain things, contractual bids. There's discretionary funds that can be spent on certain things, because you don't want to hamstring a department there's usually a budget level where you can spend money up to before it needs to go out on a bid system or some other thing. Um, so yeah, I mean, it could be not at $170 million budget. It could be complicated doing that, and it could take some months doing that. In the meantime, and then whatever you find, like you said, you will be able to address at that point. In the meantime, though, while that's happening, because that could take several months,
Sure.
you're going to be hitting the ground. You would hit the ground running. And I know there was some other things that you were talking about, like measures that you might implement to improve safety and reduce high rates of inmate injuries or deaths in the jail. Has
Correct.
that been an issue now? I haven't myself looked
Yep.
at those issues. So tell us a little bit about that, about
Sure.
what you're looking at and what you would implement day one or that
Okay.
week.
So right. So right off the bat, well, literally on day one, during his press conference, Sheriff Taylor implemented he did away with something called the rapid response team. So the rapid response team are trained personnel where if there is an issue going sideways and deputy is in danger or a jailer's in danger, then
Mhm.
the rapid response team is rapid. They're in there within seconds and making sure that the deputies are okay and that the inmates are okay too, because obviously if things get out of control, people are getting hurt. So you take away the most important tool of on day one of how to keep your own personnel safe, and you give them no tools to replace that.
Mhm.
Um, it, it turned into an immediate catastrophe. I mean, one of the people that's been helping me on my campaign was the 2019 Deputy of the Year, and she was in our jail, which is one of the biggest in the country, as
Mhm.
a jailer for uh, you know I think 18 years. And so she was training other deputies and other jailers how to do their job, not only ours, but other sheriffs would send theirs in too.
Mhm.
And they begged her to stay on and continue training. She was going to leave when Sheriff Conway left. She stayed on for they asked her to stay for 6 months. She agreed to, and within 2 weeks she left. Now she left because she saw what was going on and how she saw the writing on the wall immediately that, okay, we've got no way to maintain control because if people are getting hurt, we can't
Mhm.
protect ourselves, let alone the inmates. And
So
that's what.
let
Yes,
me
sir.
ask you a question though. Obviously, I would imagine when Sheriff Kibo came in, there was a reason why he stopped it because there
There was,
were
and
other
he's
things going on right there.
well, yeah. He said if you go back and read the news clips in
Mhm.
2019, 2020, his justification for that was that there were some charges leveled against the rapid response team of using excessive force.
Right.
And if that's true or if that's not true, as a new leader, you come in and you deal with the problem. What he did was he came in and got rid of the tool. He even said, "Hey, it's a good tool, but it's being misused."
Mhm.
So you don't get rid of the tool. If people were being abusive, then you discipline them or you fire them, and you
Mhm.
keep the tool and you train more with those data points to make sure that abuse isn't taking place.
Okay.
But
Fair enough.
but obviously, you don't come in and you undercut your entire all of your deputies and all of your jailers, and don't give them any tools to maintain control of the jail. So as they started leaving, things just have continued to spiral out of control. A jail that is supposed to have about 50 people per shift currently has about 20 people per shift. The inmates used to have eight
Mhm.
hours a day out of the cell. Now they've got 1 hour a day. They're locked up 23 hours a day. It's
Yeah.
it's crazy what's going on in the jail right now.
And it seems like there's not enough people. I know I've spoken to people in the Gwinnett Police and such. There's budget money there to hire, but there's not enough applicants. I should say qualified applicants to be
Well,
hired.
that's
Right?
only part of the issue. I mean,
Yeah.
yes, law enforcement has had its challenges,
Yeah.
since 2020. But the reality is, if you are an agency or a sheriff's office that
Mhm.
is led by a good leader, then guess what? People don't leave. People come there. So what we have seen in Gwinnett County is we've seen sheriff deputies and jailers flee this leadership because it's untenable. As a matter of fact, I did a couple of years ago. I did the Swanee Citizens Academy, Police Academy, and it just so happened I got teamed up with a officer who worked for 6 months under Butch Conway, made the transition, and after a year, he took a significant pay cut to leave the sheriff's office to go work for the city of Swanee. And talking to him that night, it's like it's what every deputy I've talked to has said, whether I solicit the question or not. They're like, yeah, it's ridiculous. You can't, it became untenable, and they left.
Well, okay. Inmate safety. I mean, it's always been a problem, I think, in any jail, right? There's only a certain amount of leeway you can do. Sometimes it can't be helped. You hear about these things all the time on, like, not in Gwinnett Sheriff jails, but in federal jails or state jails, where there's drugs in the jail. Sometimes there's other things going on, and that actually increases the inmate safety issue because there are other people causing problems among the population, if you will. What tools would you use to improve that or to reduce that? I mean, so it's not just happening because, I don't think it's just happening because officers are being abusive, and some of them have been. It's also being the other side of that. So what tools can a sheriff have to do? Do you plan on restructuring that whole command of how things are done?
Yeah, I mean, immediately I'll reinstate and train, a rapid response team. What we need the proper numbers of deputies back in the jail cell. It's a horribly dangerous job when you are critically undermanned. So the issue now is, instead of being in charge of one cell block, they've got deputies at times in charge of 2, 3, and up to 4 cell blocks. That is sheer insanity. And when you've got that type of, I mean, the inmates know that you can't maintain control of them, and so things get crazy, and you can't stop it.
Yeah.
So what's the answer to that? The answer is to keep people locked behind, in their room 23, or in their cells 23 hours a day, because you can't control them. What's that do to the mental health? That makes people, more angry, and when they do get out, there's more problems. So all of these things are precipitated by the fact that the deputies in law enforcement is a very tight-knit community. So I just went through the quote unquote police academy. I'm post certified now. I went back in September through December, and all the guys, a bunch of them were prior were jailers before, and they were coming back to get their their full post certifications. And those guys talked in depth about all the different sheriff's offices around the various counties, and about all the different police. I mean, they know. And the word, it doesn't matter. I shouldn't say it doesn't matter the money. I mean, money is always attractive, but you have to have a force that people want to join, and that is incumbent upon the leader to create the environment where people love to work, where they know that their boss has their back. They know that their boss is looking out for their career. They're invested in in training and equipping them, and so forth and so on. And that's, I mean, the history of my background for 35 years is training and equipping and leading highly performing organizations that are the number one of their type in the entire Navy. And you get, there's a specific award called the Battle Efficiency Award. Now they call it Battle Effectiveness Award. Same award, just they've changed the name. But you get that when it's the number one unit of its type in the Navy. We were awarded that back to back 3 years in a row when I was the commanding officer. So I know how to build organizations that people love to work in and love to do their job. And that's what we need here. We need that type of leadership to bring people back. And I know that they'll be back. I mean, people want to come back. I've talked to deputies all the time. They want to work here in Gwinnett, but they won't work for this sheriff.
Do you think that salaries or benefits have to change also? I mean,
Absolutely. I mean, there needs to be. I mean, right now, if you listen on the radio, you can hear, the Gwinnett County Sheriff's Office, spots on there all the time. and they're, you know, attractive
Yeah.
numbers and this, that, and the other, but they're not hiring anybody. I mean, their numbers are single digits. You know, people are not coming to their hiring conferences, and they're not responding to those ads, even though, you know, the on the surface it sounds good, because they know that, you know, it's better to work someplace for less money than it is for a boss that doesn't support you.
All
But
right.
yes, to answer your question, all of that stuff needs to be looked at. And we need to be the most competitive pay in the area and have the best leadership. And because the thing is, after you've trained people and you've equipped them and built the organization that they don't want to leave, you don't want to lose that talent. And, you know, those are the two key factors to you know, have the leadership and to have the money to support, you know, maintaining them there so they don't
And
get
that's,
trained, move on.
yeah, and that's been, I guess, the problem with law enforcement in the metro area, right? They get trained in one place, like Gwinnett County has had that, where they train police officers, they work for 2 years, and then all of a sudden they get hired away to a different county.
Right.
Um, Maybe it's closer to their home, you know, it's a lot of different reasons, right? Um, I mean, our Peachtree Corners Sheriff Restrepo, Chief Sheriff Restrepo, is a former Gwinnett County police officer. Decided this would be a good place for him to be, right?
Sure.
Um, so, you know, people do leave. So, yeah, I mean, it's hard enough to find people even in the private sector to do things, and it's difficult all around. So, unemployment is low, they say. I guess it's low. Um, but yeah, pay and bonuses do make a difference.
Yep.
And that's something a sheriff has control over, right? That's not something that has to be decided at the city council level, at the county level, I don't think.
Well, I mean,
Um,
certainly the budgets and the money come
the
from the commissioners. So,
right,
you know,
total
there would,
budgets. Right,
right.
right. But if you have like positions for 40 positions to be filled, but you can't fill it, you
Right.
still have that budget money in that line, I guess.
And the
Um,
other, to your point, when you talk about personnel and money, is, you know, the current sheriff, Sheriff Taylor, you know, has a command staff that's completely bloated. He's got all these really high level, high paying positions that he
mhm,
created, and, you know, and it's like a 3-for-1. You know, the guy who's actually doing the heavy lifting in the jails or serving warrants, you know, their pay compared to all of these created positions is
mhm,
way out of whack compared to what's, you know, normative. And, you know, that'll be something that, you know, we'll go back through and rescale that to the right number and have the positions that are needed, but we're not going to have
mhm.
fat in there just collecting a paycheck and, you know, having duplicative jobs or whatever else. It's just not happening.
So you're not just auditing budgets and stuff. You're going to be auditing the structure of the command, who's
Everything.
where,
Yep.
everything. Okay. Um, One of the things that you point out too is constitutional training,
Correct.
mandating constitutional education, how to enhance the daily responsibilities of the deputies and jailers.
Sure.
Now, so tell us a little bit about that, what you mean by that.
Well, it's interesting because, you know, 35 years in the Navy, and every time you have a promotion, you reaffirm your oath to protect the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And, you know, it might seem a little more intuitive, possibly, for military personnel because, you know, we're typically overseas and you know,
Right.
worrying about the people attacking the country and protecting our Constitution in that capacity. But in order to do your job in law enforcement, you need to understand how the Constitution, you know, applies to you,
Mm-hmm.
and that has to factor into. Uh, I mean, you have to know because you're swearing an oath to it too. So what does it mean? You know, there are laws on the books, and we've seen throughout history that there are times when, you know, mandates can come down that are not constitutional. So then the question becomes, as the senior law enforcement officer in the county, what are you going to do about that? And
Mm-hmm.
if people don't understand the Constitution, then they can't work through that. And that's important. I mean, I think it's a big problem in America that the Constitution is more and more being ignored. And when you have, you know, a mandate that is a potential massive violation of the constitutional rights of the citizens, then the sheriff is the one that needs to engage on that and let people know this will or this will not happen. And so the
So,
sheriff, if the
so
sheriff needs to know it, then everybody also needs to know it, because they need to understand why their command is taking a certain stand.
okay, that almost begs the question, though. Okay, that if the sheriff is supposed to enforce mandates that come
Right.
down, these are laws, just like anything else that needs to be implemented. Sheriff can't. I mean, it's been done. Obviously, we see it at the federal level where certain laws are being ignored. Right. Um, Now, is that right to do? Can you slow walk that law, if you will, and not do it? You know, I get it that there's priorities, and that sometimes you might say, well, the priority is not that law. We're not gonna step through and enforce that, right? We're gonna be enforcing these other laws that really are important. But
Well, I wouldn't put
obviously,
it. I wouldn't put it that way,
I
because
mean,
it's
how
important to
would you put?
understand. Yeah, I wouldn't say. I mean, the laws are the laws, and they
Right.
need to be enforced as long as they're not violate. For example, you saw. I mean, I guess probably the best current example might be that in some counties during COVID, you saw sheriffs arresting pastors for having church on Sunday, and in other counties, you saw sheriffs standing literally in the doors of churches, preventing state police from coming in and disrupting the services. So the question then
Right.
becomes, if the Constitution is the authoritative law of the land, and our
Hmm.
Georgia Constitution is also, the authoritative law in Georgia, then unless there is something that says, okay, there's no more religious freedom, then your job is to understand what is and what is not a legal, declaration. And so you have to, because at the end of the day, the
Yeah.
individual citizen, the last person in between their constitutional rights being violated or not, is the
Hmm.
sheriff of that county. So I'm not saying that it's normative that that happens, but I'm saying you have to recognize if something comes down that is not constitutional, it's your oath, it's your obligation, if you actually are going to fulfill your oath, to make sure that your citizens' rights aren't violated.
Okay. I don't disagree with you. I just and we can leave it at that. But it's just someone has to. It's like everything else. Someone has to decide then whether that's unconstitutional. Now, do we leave it up to the courts to decide that, or the individual sheriff, lead sheriff, chief sheriff in a county to decide that? And every county
Well,
may
I mean,
do it different,
yeah,
right? I mean,
if
just
there are subtle things, that's right. But something as egregious as, okay, you are not allowed to go to church. I mean, that is a gross violation of your religious freedoms. Period. It is. I mean, you
yeah.
can't.
Hey,
People might want to argue that, but it's a gross violation.
I mean, I
So
mean, okay, I could see that.
yeah,
Of course, the CDC, and we don't have to get into the politics of this,
right.
but if they feel it's a health issue, is that unconstitutional?
Their feelings don't get to supersede the Constitution. That's the bottom
Constitution,
line.
yeah. No, I
That's
get it.
and whenever it does, that puts our entire society at risk. I've seen societies collapse, and I spent most of my life in those areas because of things
It's
getting out of control. And so
and, and I agree. It's a
we
fragile.
can't allow that to happen here in
It
the United States.
it's a fragile system,
Yep.
and we're constantly fighting to keep democracy or our republic alive, if you will.
Right.
Because it doesn't take much for, like you said, it really doesn't take much. Um, Especially when we had the riots during the COVID time. Remember when
Yep.
CNN was almost broken
The,
into during the riots then? And it's just like, what is
the
going
the
on?
most you forgot the mostly peaceful riots.
The mostly, yes. Yes. Yeah, we could talk about that at some point.
Right.
But yeah,
If
amazing.
you're a cigar guy, come over to the house and we can sit out back.
Cigar and bourbon. Yeah, there you go. Jail dogs program. So I mean that's one of the things you mentioned, I think, in your program about jail dogs, about
Yeah, I
vehicle
mean
branding.
right.
So
That's
there's a
just
bunch of
another
things.
example of it. That's insane that program went away. Okay, so here's a program that literally cost the taxpayers zero, not 1 cent.
Hmm.
It's a phenomenal program for the mental health of the inmates. And I mean, it's a huge incentive for them to be on good conduct so that they can actually get an animal so that they can train that animal. The mental health aspects of that are off the chart. The jailers loved it because people would behave so that they could be in line to get a jail dog assigned to them. They would train the thing, have all this feeling of accomplishments, this, that, and the other. The dog obviously is good for the dogs because they got saved, they got adopted out, and it was just and like I said, it didn't cost a penny.
So why
to
was
do
it
away
done?
with that is just, I mean, that's just another example of failed leadership.
All right. Other things you've mentioned, vehicle branding.
Right.
So we'll hit some of these other things quick. So
Sure.
vehicle branding was one. What's with that?
Yeah, exactly. What is with that? So
Tell me.
right when Sheriff Taylor took over, he took all the county cars that belonged to the sheriff's office, and he had his name painted on the back of them. I was like,
Okay.
okay, seriously, you paid $100? Who God only knows how much money, however much it is. If it's over 1 cent, the Navy would call that fraud, waste, and abuse. But the bottom line is, he's got his name spray painted all over these vehicles at county expense. The irony now is he can't drive a sheriff's deputy's vehicle up to a polling place because that's campaigning. So if there's a problem at a polling station, he can't respond.
I didn't even think about
Yeah.
that.
So anyway, but
Okay.
it's just ridiculous. That is the pinnacle of arrogance and egotism in my mind, and to spend that money that frivolously on something like that.
All right. Beyond that, let's talk about reassigning personnel. Part of it was bodyguards and drivers to other roles that benefit the sheriff's
Right. So
office.
when you're critically short of personnel to begin with, he's got a bodyguard that goes around with him. He's also got a driver. Actually, I think he's got 2 drivers, or has had 2 drivers. So, I mean, that's manpower that's critically needed in our jails or serving warrants, because right now we have about 50,000 unserved warrants because more warrants come in than can get served every day because we're critically short and people won't work for this sheriff. So every day the warrants stack up. They can only serve so many. So every day he's in office, we're just going to keep getting more and more warrants.
I
That
mean,
aren't served,
listen.
I should say that haven't been served.
Okay. I don't have anything against bodyguards. I mean, things can happen, right? It's not.
Sure.
It's not a. It's not a. It's a violent society sometimes. So I don't see why not have a bodyguard. But um, serving warrants, though, it's a different story. Can't that be done by private services contracted for to be able
Yeah.
to stem through that? I mean, is
Yeah.
that a reasonable thing?
Yeah. I think it's reasonable, especially when you don't have the manpower,
Right.
or they won't work for you. Then you better figure out a solution. But the last official number that I got, there was am I allowed to say leaked to me? It wasn't gotten through FOIA because I don't have that much money to keep asking these questions to try to get official numbers. But this was an official number. It was 48,632 as of about a month ago, and every month it's been going up. So,
right. And to be fair, I mean, a lot of that may have been before his.
oh yeah,
Like you said, right?
but the fact that the numbers skyrocket because his warrant division is been decimated and by people leaving, we're not getting every day that those individuals are walking around without having been brought in is a potential death or a potential violent act or a potential robbery or whatever else.
Sure.
These are important things to get our arms around.
It's good to have that discussion. I mean,
Sure.
definitely, especially in it's one thing to be to voting for one of over 330 House reps. They do make laws that affect people and stuff,
Yeah.
but the sheriff system really has to be taken more seriously. We're towards the end of our time together, Baron. Is there anything that we haven't discussed that you want to share?
Well, I would just, again, ask people to go on my website. It's baron4gwinnett.com and look up, my background and look up, all my proposals, at least my initial day 1 proposals are on there. Like I said, there's a reason why Sheriff Conway, who was the sheriff for a quarter century here in Gwinnett County, endorsed me. And he sat down and he said, "Baron, you're the only person with the background and the senior level experience in command and the senior knowledge of budgets and how to make things happen and how to apply for money and how to engage the commissioners and on and on and on, and with the personnel experience with running the entire Navy's 388,000 personnel and keeping that manned and that part of that responsibility was the bonus structure for the entire Navy, and administering that. I mean, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in bonuses across the Navy. So it's obvious from his perspective that I'm the only person qualified that's running to do that in a manner of sustained superior performance, which is my track record. So I've always loved people. I've loved serving people my entire career. That's the biggest thing I miss about the Navy, is the fact that as I got more responsibility and more seniority, I could affect more and more people's lives and their families' lives and advocate for them more powerfully in their career. So I'm looking forward to doing that leadership aspect, but also bringing our county and making our county safe and our jails safe, and basically making it safe for the taxpayer, for the jailer, for the deputies, and for our inmates. That's the bottom line.
Okay. So, okay, cool. People know where to find out more information. You've been out, there's early voting going on. When we've recorded this was recorded on the 8th, on Wednesday. And so there's early voting going on. I think that, I'm not sure when that ends, early voting.
It ends the 17th.
17th, okay. The Friday before Election Day, which is May 21st.
Right, 21st. Yes.
Right. And you're running on the Democratic?
I'm running on the Republican ticket.
Republican ticket.
So,
okay.
And the primary, it's Mike Baker and I that are running against each other on the Republican side, and then Kibo Taylor, who's the incumbent, and Curtis Clemens, Joe Mark, and Brian Whiteside are running on the Democrat against the incumbent.
So people listening to this, as opposed to school board races, which are decided on this election, May 21st, since it's a nonpartisan or deemed nonpartisan. This race, once the ballots are decided. So if you're looking to want to support Barron, obviously you need to pull the Republican ballot to be able to do that. Or the Democratic ballot if you want to vote on that side. So either way. And then the election actually runs through until November, where decisions are made. So,
right. So November, if I'm the candidate, then it'll be running against. Well, there was probably going to be a runoff, my guess, on the Democrat side, since people are.
Yeah, I would think so.
If not, there's not. But whoever wins that is going to be hopefully who I'm running against.
Yeah, it seems like it. Well, Baron Reinhold, I appreciate you taking your time speaking to me about the issues of where you feel passionate about and how you feel you would handle the Gwinnett County Sheriff Department. People know where to reach you now, or at least where to find your information. And if they want to reach you via email or phone, the information's on your website, I'm assuming.
Absolutely. Right.
Great. So hang in there with me for a minute. Everyone else, I appreciate you joining us, listening to this. We'll be doing some other candidate podcasts over the next week or so, few days. There's a few more that I'll be interviewing in different races. So check it out and share this with your friends. Appreciate your time.